Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and welcome. Let's just jump right in today. Imagine you are building a house. You know, you spend months, maybe even years, just pouring the concrete foundation.
Right. The really heavy lifting.
Exactly. You carefully frame the walls, you install the plumbing, and finally, it feels like the hardest work is behind you. I mean, the structure is standing.
Well, it's standing, yeah, but it isn't actually a home yet. I mean, if you just stop right there, you're still completely exposed to the elements.
Yeah, the weather.
Right. The rain will just ruin the floors and the wind will tear right through the rooms.
Yeah.
You need that final defining piece of the architecture. You know, you need the roof.
You need the roof. Exactly. And that brings us to the focus of today's deep dive. We are looking at a chapter of the Quran that acts kind of like the roof of the Islamic faith.
I like that comparison. It really fits.
Yeah, because it doesn't just lay the basic foundation. It seals the entire building. It covers the massive, sweeping issues of human society. You know, things like international peace treaties and the rules of war.
And at the same time, it covers the very personal, everyday details.
Yeah.
Like exactly what you were allowed to eat for dinner tonight.
Right. It's a fascinating structural comparison, and we're going to get into all of that today. But a quick note for you, our listener, before we go any further.
Yes, this is important.
We are doing something very special with this deep dive. This conversation is designed specifically to help you improve your English while you explore the depths of Islam.
Exactly. We know many of you are learning.
Right. So we are going to speak clearly and use simple, natural English. And whenever we hit a complex term or, an Arabic word, we're going to unpack it naturally as we go. We want you to grasp the deep history here without getting lost in the vocabulary.
Yeah, we aren't watering down the ideas at all. We are making sure the language is a bridge, not a barrier.
Beautifully said. So let's cross that bridge. Today, we are exploring the 5th chapter of the Quran. Now, the Arabic word for a chapter of the Quran is surah.
Surah.
Right. So when you hear us say surah, we just mean chapter. For example, if you read a section of the Quran this morning, you could say, I read a beautiful surah today.
That's a great example. And the specific surah we are looking at today is called Al-Maidah.
Al-Maidah. What does that mean exactly?
It's an Arabic word that translates to the table spread with food, like a dining table that is completely covered with a huge feast.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if you were hosting a big dinner party, you could say to your guests, my friends gathered around the Maidah.
I love that. So we are diving into Surah Al-Maidah, the table spread with food. But if we really want to understand the rules and the laws in the surah, we can't just read it in a vacuum, right?
No, absolutely not. Context is everything.
Right. We need to know the historical reality of the world it arrived in. We have to understand exactly when and why this text was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
And that context is really fascinating because this is a very long chapter. It has 120 verses. And significantly, it is a late Madani chapter.
Okay, let's clarify what Madani means for the listener. Because the Prophet Muhammad's mission, it was split into 2 major phases.
Right, 2 distinct cities.
First, he lived in Mecca, where the Muslims were this small, persecuted minority. So the chapters revealed there, the Makki chapters, they are mostly about deep spiritual foundations, right? Like belief in one God and the afterlife.
Yes, the foundational beliefs. But later, the Muslims migrated to the city of Medina.
Right.
And in Medina, they weren't just a small hidden group anymore. They were building an actual society. They had an economy, a legal system, foreign relations. So the Madani chapters deal with the laws of a functioning community.
Okay, that makes sense. But why is Surah Al-Maidah unique among those Madani chapters?
Because it was revealed very late in the Medina period. In fact, it is one of the very last chapters ever given to the Prophet.
So paint a picture of that time for us. What was the psychological and political state of the Muslim community right then?
It was a time of unprecedented stability. I mean, for decades, they had faced war, starvation, the threat of total destruction.
Just constant survival mode.
Exactly. But now they had survived. They had negotiated major international agreements like the famous Treaty of Hudaybiyah.
Which secured a period of peace.
Yes,
right?
a crucial peace. The Prophet was also undertaking the farewell pilgrimage, which was his final massive journey to Makkah. The community was strong. They were finally secure.
But there is a bittersweet reality to that success, isn't there? I mean, if the mission is complete, it means the messenger's time on earth is coming to a close.
That's the heavy reality of it, yes.
Which brings us to a massive concept in Islam. And it's encapsulated in an Arabic word we really need to define for our learners. The word is deen.
Ah, yes. Deen. It is often translated simply as religion, but in English, religion sometimes just means what you do on a Sunday morning or what holidays you celebrate.
Right, like a private weekend thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But deen is vastly more comprehensive than that. It means a complete, all-encompassing way of life.
Okay, so it covers everything.
Everything. It dictates how you pray, yes, but also how you conduct a business transaction, how you resolve a conflict with your neighbor, even how you treat the environment. When a Muslim says, Islam is my deen, they mean it is the operating system for their entire existence.
The operating system, I really like that phrase. And that operating system gets its final update in this very chapter.
It does.
In the 3rd verse of Surah Al-Ma'idah, there is this legendary declaration. The text says, "This day I have perfected for you your religion. The deen is perfected."
It's a breathtaking verse. Truly, when the Quran says the deen is perfected, it means the legal and spiritual framework is 100% finished.
No missing pieces.
No missing pieces. No new major prophets are coming, and no new fundamental laws are going to be added. The roof, going back to your metaphor, has been placed on the house. The believers now have everything they need to navigate the world until the end of time.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second because I want to push back a little bit here.
Do? Go ahead.
If this moment is so grand, so historical, and so serious, the ultimate perfection of the entire religion, why on earth is the chapter named after a dining table?
That is a very fair question.
Right. I mean, naming the final perfect legal code, the table spread with food, sounds like we're talking about a dinner party. It just feels like a clash of tones to me.
It does seem strange at first glance, but that is a brilliant observation because it highlights one of the most profound psychological warnings in the entire Quran.
Okay, color me intrigued. How so?
Well, the name actually refers to a specific historical event that is mentioned much later in the chapter, down in verses 112 to 114. It is the story of Prophet Jesus, who is known as Asa in Islam.
Right, Jesus. And Jesus had his closest followers, his inner circle of students, who we usually call the disciples.
Yes. Now, the disciples believed in Jesus, but they wanted a physical, undeniable miracle.
Like, they wanted proof they could see.
Exactly. They wanted absolute proof that they could see, touch, and taste. So they asked Jesus to pray to God to send down Al-Maidah, a table spread with a miraculous feast coming straight out of heaven.
Oh, wow. So they explicitly asked for this table.
They did. They explicitly said they wanted to eat from it so their hearts would be at peace and so they could be witnesses to the truth.
That's kind of wild. They wanted to bypass spiritual trust and just get physical evidence. Basically, they wanted God to literally cater their dinner.
That's one way to put it, yes. Now, Jesus does pray for it, and God agrees to send it, but Jesus issues a very stark warning along with it.
What kind of warning?
The underlying message is that physical miracles, material wealth, and worldly food are not the ultimate goal of faith. True righteousness isn't about the food on the table. It is about the state of your heart.
Oh, I see. So naming this grand chapter, the table spread, is actually a giant warning sign for the Muslim community.
Precisely. Remember the context we just talked about. The Muslims are finally safe. They are strong, and they are becoming prosperous. The persecution is finally over.
Right. They have money and security now.
And when human beings get comfortable and wealthy, what usually happens, they become obsessed with the material world.
Yeah, they forget the struggle.
They start caring more about the luxury of their dining tables than the purity of their souls. So naming the chapter of perfected religion after a feast is God's way of saying, your religion is complete, but do not let the comforts of this world distract you.
Wow. Do not fail the test of prosperity.
Exactly. Do not fail the test of prosperity.
That is an incredible paradigm shift. I mean, it tells us that surviving poverty and war is one test, but surviving wealth and comfort might actually be harder.
It often is.
So if the religion is perfected, the immediate question for you, the listener, is how does a believer actually demonstrate that perfection in their daily life? And it seems the text points straight to human integrity, specifically the words that come out of our mouths.
Yes, the very first verse of the chapter sets the tone for everything that follows. And it revolves around another crucial vocabulary word. The word is Uqud.
Uqud. Okay, how do we define that in simple English?
Uqud means contracts, promises, or binding agreements. So if you sign a lease to rent an apartment, that is an Uqud.
Okay, a legal contract. What about personal things?
Yes, those too. If you promise your child you will take them to the park on Saturday, that is an Uqud. A person of high character is someone who fulfills their Uqud.
And verse 1 of this chapter begins with a massive, uncompromising command, right? It says, "O you who have believed, fulfill all contracts, fulfill all uqud."
It leaves absolutely no room for loopholes, and this applies first and foremost to the cosmic contract.
What do you mean by the cosmic contract?
Well, when you say you will look in God, you are entering an uqud with the Creator. You are promising to uphold ethical standards. But then that promise cascades down into every single human interaction.
So business contracts, international treaties, marriage vows.
All of them. In Islam, your spiritual faith is completely tied to your worldly reliability. You cannot be a good believer if you constantly break your promises to people. Your word has to be a bond.
I really love thinking about this in the context of our modern digital world, because think about terms of service agreements.
Oh, yes. The digital contracts.
Right. You download a new piece of software on your phone, and this massive 50-page wall of legal text pops up. What do 99% of people do?
They just scroll right past it.
Exactly. We instantly scroll to the bottom and click, "I agree," without reading a single word. We are legally binding ourselves to things we haven't even looked at.
It is the perfect modern analogy. We have become incredibly casual with our agreements today. We make promises blindly.
But this verse is essentially saying you cannot live your life on autopilot like that. When you give your word, you are taking on a profound moral weight.
You absolutely are.
You have to actually understand what you are agreeing to, and then you have to follow through. You are completely responsible for your words.
You are responsible. And that individual responsibility naturally extends to how we work with others in society. Which brings us to verse 2.
What does verse 2 cover?
It outlines the ultimate rules for teamwork and societal cooperation. And to understand it, we need to contrast two foundational concepts. The Arabic words are bur and idhm.
Okay, let's break those down for our learners. What is bur?
Bur represents righteousness, goodness, or pure ethical action. It is when you do something that objectively helps people and aligns with God's will.
Can you give a simple example?
Sure. Building a hospital is an act of bur. Speaking the truth in a very difficult situation is an act of bur.
And the polar opposite of that is idhm.
Yes. Idhm means sin, harm, or destructive action. It is when your actions hurt others, when you exploit people, or when you violate moral laws.
So like stealing.
Stealing, defrauding an investor, lying to a friend, those are all acts of idhm.
So verse 2 gives us this crystal clear formula for how to act. It commands, cooperate with one another in bur and piety, but do not cooperate in idhm and aggression.
It sounds so simple, right?
It does.
But it is a fiercely difficult rule to live by, especially in the modern workplace. Let's say you work for a large corporation, and your manager asks you to join a team that is rolling out a new product.
Okay, pretty standard situation.
Before you agree, this verse demands that you evaluate the project. Does this product genuinely help people? Is the marketing honest? If yes, then it is bur. And you should pour your energy into cooperating with your team.
But what if you realize the product has hidden flaws, or, the marketing is intentionally deceiving vulnerable customers? That becomes idhm.
Exactly. And the Islamic rule is absolute here. You must walk away. You cannot cooperate in idhm.
Even if your boss tells you to.
Even then, you can't use the excuse, well, I'm just a low-level employee, or my boss told me to do it, so the sin is on him. No. Islam gives you individual moral agency. You cannot lend your skills, your time, or your silence to a project that causes harm.
Wow. So your integrity is entirely non-negotiable. You are bound by the contracts of your words, and you are bound by the morality of your actions.
Beautifully summarized.
Now, from the contracts we make with our words and our labor, the chapter moves into the incredibly intimate contract we make with our own bodies. We are talking about food.
Yes, mindful eating. And since the chapter is named the table spread, it is very fitting that it contains some of the most detailed dietary laws in the entire Quran.
Right. And to navigate this section, we need 3 interconnected words: halal, haram, and a critically important word, tayyib.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people, even non-Muslims, are already familiar with the word halal. You see it on restaurant windows and food packaging all over the world.
Right. Halal simply means lawful or permitted. It means a specific action or item is legally allowed. For example, drinking fresh water is halal.
And the direct opposite of that is haram.
Exactly. Haram means forbidden or unlawful. It is a strict boundary you cannot cross. For example, consuming alcohol is strictly haram.
But it's that third word, tayyib, that really elevates the conversation, isn't it? It takes it from basic legal rules to deep philosophy.
It really does. Tayyib is a beautiful concept. It means pure, wholesome, clean, and ethical.
Ethical food.
Yes. It implies that something is inherently good for you, both physically and spiritually. The Quran doesn't just ask believers to eat food that is technically halal. It commands them to eat food that is halal and tayyib.
I really love that distinction. So let's look at the actual list of what is haram, what is forbidden, according to verses 3 and 5 of this surah.
The verses lay out very specific prohibitions. Muslims are forbidden from eating carrion.
Carrion meaning an animal that died naturally of old age or disease.
Correct. They are also forbidden from consuming flowing blood. And the meat of swine or pork is absolutely forbidden.
But it doesn't just stop at the type of animal, does it? It goes into granular detail about exactly how an animal dies, which I found fascinating.
It really is. The verse explicitly forbids eating an animal that was killed by a violent blow, like being beaten to death.
Oh, awful.
It forbids eating an animal that died from a high fall, or an animal that was gored by another animal, or partially eaten by a wild predator.
So, if all of those methods are outlawed, how is a Muslim supposed to ethically source meat?
It requires a highly intentional process. The animal must be slaughtered by a trained individual using a razor-sharp blade to sever the major vessels instantly. This minimizes the animal's pain and fear. Furthermore, the person must explicitly invoke the name of Allah, God, at the moment of slaughter.
Why is mentioning the name of God so crucial to the process?
Because it acts as a profound psychological check. Life is sacred. God created that animal. Human beings do not inherently have the right to just violently take a life whenever they feel hungry.
Right, it's not just ours for the taking.
Exactly. By saying God's name, you are acknowledging that you are taking this life only by divine permission. You are doing it out of necessity for sustenance. It prevents that arrogant, industrialized mindset that views animals merely as unfeeling commodities.
And this is exactly why that concept of tayyib is so relevant today. I mean, we live in an era of massive factory farming.
We certainly do.
So, even if a piece of meat is technically slaughtered in the correct way, making it legally halal, if that animal was locked in a dark cage its entire life, pumped full of hormones and abused, we have to ask, is it tayyib?
That is the exact question believers need to ask. Is it wholesome and pure?
This 1,400-year-old text is basically demanding conscious, ethical consumerism. It's forcing you to ask, where did my food come from and how did it suffer to get to my plate?
That is precisely the ethical standard being established here. And there's a dual purpose to these laws. First is physical health.
Sure, avoiding disease.
Right. Consuming blood, diseased animals, or animals killed by blunt force trauma carries immense risk of pathogens. But the second, deeper reason is spiritual purity.
How does food affect spiritual purity?
The Islamic view is that what you put into your physical body directly impacts your spiritual heart. If you consume cruelty, disease, and impurity, your soul becomes clouded.
Now, despite how strict all these rules sound, there is a massive, incredibly humane exception built right into the exact same verse.
Yes, because Islam is fundamentally a religion of balance, and the preservation of human life is paramount.
So what is the exception?
The verse concludes by stating that if a person is driven by extreme hunger, if they are starving and have absolutely no other options, eating these forbidden foods is not a sin.
Okay, so if I'm stranded in the wilderness, freezing and starving, and the only thing I find is an animal that died from a fall, I can eat it.
Not only can you eat it, but arguably you must eat it to preserve your life. The verse says, "Indeed, Allah is forgiving and merciful." The preservation of human life overrides the dietary restriction. God does not want you to starve to death just to prove a point about legalism.
That flexibility is so striking. And, the surah also uses food not just to discipline the believer, but to build bridges with other communities. Verse 5 introduces a very inclusive social dynamic.
It does. It states clearly that the food of the people of the book, meaning Jewish and Christian communities, is lawful for Muslims. Specifically, meat that they have properly slaughtered according to their own divine traditions is halal for a Muslim to eat.
That is a huge sociological statement. It means a Muslim can go to their Jewish neighbor's house or sit down at a Christian friend's dining table and break bread with them.
Exactly. Food is the ultimate unifier.
It really is. By allowing this, the Quran is actively facilitating social integration and peaceful coexistence.
Absolutely. It removes the barriers to everyday friendship. But as the chapter progresses, it moves from the discipline of our diets to a much harder discipline.
What's harder than controlling what we eat?
Controlling our egos. Disciplining our bodies is one thing. Disciplining our anger and our deep-seated biases is the ultimate challenge.
Which brings us to a concept that is arguably the beating heart of the entire Quran, the highest standard of justice. And to grasp this, we have to look at two heavy words, adl and taqwa.
Let's start with adl, which is sometimes also referred to as qist. Both words deal with justice, fairness, and equity.
Simple enough.
But adl isn't just a legal concept for a courtroom. It is a moral imperative for everyday life. A judge in a courtroom must act with adl, yes, but so must a parent who is dividing a cake between two children.
Fairness in all things. And the engine that drives a person to practice adl is taqwa. We've touched on this word before in other deep dives, but it's so vital we need to define it clearly for our listeners.
Taqwa is often translated as God consciousness or piety. It is the constant internal awareness that the Creator sees everything you do, hear, and think.
Like an internal moral compass.
Exactly. If you have taqwa, you refuse to cheat on a test or steal from a cash register, not because there are security cameras watching, but because God is watching.
So let's look at verse 8 of Surah Al-Ma'idah, because it weaves these two concepts together in a breathtaking way. It says, be just, that is nearer to piety. Act with adl, that is nearer to taqwa.
But the setup for that command is what makes it one of the most difficult verses in the Quran to actually live by. The verse explicitly commands, do not let your hatred of a people prevent you from being just.
Okay, stop right there. I have to push back hard on this.
Go for it.
It is very, very easy to be fair to people I love. If my best friend makes a mistake, I give them the benefit of the doubt. I listen to their context. But if someone is my enemy,
Right.
if a group of people has actively harmed me, and I possess a deep, visceral hatred for them, human nature dictates that I want revenge. Being perfectly fair to someone you despise feels almost impossible.
You're exactly right. Human nature craves tribalism. We want to protect our own people and destroy our enemies. But this verse is demanding that believers transcend their base biology. It is demanding radical objectivity.
How does this Islamic concept of adl differ from the modern buzzword of equality? We hear about equality constantly in politics and media today.
It's a vital distinction to make.
Yep.
Equality generally implies treating every single person exactly the same way, regardless of circumstances.
Right.
But justice, adl, means putting things in their proper, rightful place based on objective truth. It means giving a person exactly what they deserve, nothing more and nothing less, entirely divorced from your personal feelings about them.
Give us the historical anchor for this. What was actually happening to the Muslims when this verse was revealed? It wasn't just abstract philosophy, right?
Not at all. It was highly charged. Earlier in Islamic history, groups of polytheists, idol worshippers from Makkah, had brutally persecuted the Muslims.
They drove them out of their homes.
Yes. And eventually, these groups physically blocked the Muslims from traveling to the Kaaba to perform their sacred pilgrimage. This was a profound humiliation and a violation of deeply held rights. The Muslims were traumatized and they were furious.
They felt oppressed, and rightly so.
Yes. But years later, the power dynamic flipped. The Muslims became the dominant power in the region. And some of those exact same polytheist groups now needed to travel through Muslim territories.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The natural human reaction from the Muslims was, now we have the power. They blocked us, so we are going to block them. We will make them feel the pain they caused us.
It's the classic cycle of abuse. The oppressed gains power and becomes the oppressor.
Exactly. And right at that precarious moment, this verse comes down like a lightning bolt.
Yeah.
It tells the Muslims, absolutely not. You cannot commit an injustice today just because an injustice was done to you yesterday.
Wow.
Your historical trauma and your justified anger do not give you a blank check to act unfairly. Justice must be entirely blind to your personal pain.
That is staggering. It demands that even to your worst enemies, the people who traumatized you, you must grant them perfect fairness.
Because your justice isn't about your relationship with the enemy. Your justice is a manifestation of your relationship with God. You are fair because God is fair and God commands it.
So that's why the verse says, be just. That is near to taqwa. You bypass your emotions and rely on your God consciousness.
Exactly. You bypass the anger.
That is a beautiful ideal. But we know human history is drenched in blood. What happens when we fail to uphold that standard? What happens when we let our tribalism, our jealousy, and our hatred take the steering wheel?
The Surah answers that question immediately by taking us all the way back to the dawn of humanity. It shows us the catastrophic result of unchecked emotion by recounting the very first murder in human history.
The tragedy of Qabil and Habil, or as they are known in Western traditions, Cain and Abel.
Yes, the two sons of Prophet Adam. And to understand their story, we need to introduce two more vital vocabulary words, korban and zulm.
What does korban entail?
Korban translates to a sacrifice or an offering. It represents giving up something you value deeply and dedicating it to God as a symbol of your devotion, sincerity, and love.
Can you give a simple example of a korban?
Offering a portion of your wealth or livestock to feed the poor for the sake of God. That is a korban.
Okay, got it. And the second word is zulm.
Zulm is perhaps the darkest word in the Islamic vocabulary. It means injustice, oppression, or tyranny. It is the exact opposite of adl.
So, unfairness.
Extreme unfairness. It means placing something where it does not belong, usually by violating the rights of another living being, exploiting a worker, abusing an animal, or taking a life unjustly. Those are all acts of zulm.
So let's look at the narrative in verses 27 through 32. We have Qabil and Habil, the sons of the first man.
The Quran tells us that both brothers were instructed to offer according to God. Now, Habil was a shepherd, a caretaker of flocks. When it came time to offer his sacrifice, he carefully selected a plump, healthy, valuable goat.
He gave the absolute best of what he had.
Yes, reflecting a heart full of sincerity.
But Qabil, the other brother, was a farmer, and his approach was entirely different.
Qabil lacked sincerity. He gathered a bundle of cheap, low-quality, perhaps even rotting crops from his harvest. He offered the bare minimum. He treated the sacrifice as an annoying chore rather than an act of devotion.
And the text says that God, who looks directly into the heart, accepted Habil's sincere offering, but rejected Qabil's half-hearted one.
This is the critical moment where zulm is born. When Qabil's sacrifice is rejected, he doesn't self-reflect. He doesn't say, I should have been more sincere. Instead, his ego shatters.
He blames his brother.
He projects his failure onto his brother. A toxic, burning jealousy consumes him, and he looks at his own flesh and blood and declares, I will surely kill you.
That escalation is terrifying, just from a rejected sacrifice to murder. But Habil's response is one of the most profound displays of courage and pacifism in religious literature. He doesn't pull out a weapon to defend himself.
No, Habil stands his ground morally. He tells his brother, if you raise your hand to kill me, I will not raise my hand to kill you. Indeed, I fear Allah, Lord of the worlds.
He is basically saying, I refuse to let your hatred drag me down into the mud. I will not become a murderer just because you are threatening me. He anchors himself entirely in taqwa.
But Qabil's jealousy has completely blinded him. The text says his soul prompted him, or made the heinous act seem acceptable to him. He strikes his brother down. He introduces murder into the human story.
I want to highlight a highly cinematic, incredibly dark detail that the Quran includes here. After Qabil commits the murder, he is standing over his brother's lifeless body, and suddenly he is struck by absolute bewilderment. He doesn't know what to do with the corpse.
Because up until this exact moment, nobody in human history had ever died.
Right. He is staring at a biological reality he has never seen before.
It is a moment of profound, terrifying isolation. He has broken the world, and he has no idea how to clean up the mess. He is helpless.
And the way God intervenes is fascinating. God doesn't send a majestic angel to teach him. He sends a crow. A black bird lands on the earth and begins furiously scratching and digging a hole in the dirt, demonstrating to this human being how to bury the dead.
The symbolism is devastating. The human being who believed he was so powerful that he could hold the power of life and death is reduced to being a student of a scavenging bird. Qabil breaks down and cries, "Woe to me! Am I not even able to be like this crow and hide the dead body of my brother?" It's the ultimate humiliation of human arrogance. The zulm is complete, and all he is left with is regret.
And from this grim, intimate story of two brothers, the surah zooms out to deliver one of the most famous, sweeping, legal, and philosophical principles in the entire Quran. It's in verse 32.
Yes, because of this first murder, God establishes a universal equation regarding the sanctity of human life. The verse declares, if anyone kills one innocent person, it is as if they have killed all of mankind. And if anyone saves one life, it is as if they have saved all of mankind.
Let's really pause and think about the sheer scale of that statement. The math defies normal logic. One life equals all of humanity. Why? How does taking one life equate to killing the whole world?
Because in the Islamic worldview, human life is not a mere biological accident. It is a sacred, interconnected web woven by God. When you murder an innocent person, you aren't just ending their heartbeat.
You're ending their entire future.
You are destroying an entire universe of potential. Their future children, the ideas they would have shared, the kindness they would have spread, more profoundly, you are attacking the very concept of the sanctity of life.
Right. The precedent.
If one innocent person can be killed unjustly, The psychological barrier is broken, and no one on earth is truly safe.
But the reverse is equally breathtaking. If you save one life, whether you are a paramedic pulling someone from a wrecked car, a firefighter, or just a bystander who intervenes to stop an assault, you are upholding the sacredness of God's creation. You are a hero to the entire human race.
It proves the supreme, unquantifiable value of human life. Every single person matters infinitely.
So if human life is that interconnected and sacred, it leads us to a very practical question about how we structure a diverse society. The Surah transitions from the story of human brotherhood to the complexities of interfaith relations. How should the Muslim community interact with people who believe differently than they do?
Navigating these relationships is central to the final sections of the chapter. And to discuss this accurately, we need to introduce the term Al-Kitab.
Al-Kitab. What is the literal translation and who does it refer to?
It translates to the people of the book. In the Quranic context, this specifically identifies Jewish and Christian communities.
And why that specific title?
They are granted this unique title because Islam recognizes that they too received legitimate divine revelations, books like the Torah given to Moses and the Gospel given to Jesus. There is a shared theological ancestry.
So how does Surah Al-Maidah instruct Muslims to engage with the Al-Kitab?
It provides highly nuanced, incredibly balanced guidance. On a social level, we already saw in verse 5, the Muslims are permitted to eat the food of Jewish and Christian people.
The shared meals.
Yes. But verse 5 goes significantly further. It explicitly permits Muslim men to marry chaste, honorable women from the Al-Kitab.
That is profound. I mean, we aren't just talking about tolerating someone from a distance. Marriage is the most intimate human bond. It's sharing a home, raising children together, blending families.
Exactly. By explicitly permitting this, the Quran proves that deep, loving, and peaceful interpersonal relationships between different faiths are not just possible, but sanctioned.
However, we have to address verse 51 in this chapter because it is frequently quoted and often highly misunderstood. It contains a stark warning telling believers not to take groups of Jews or Christians as allies or protecting friends. A surface-level reading makes people think, wait, does Islam ban me from having a Jewish or Christian friend?
This is where we must be incredibly impartial and dive into the deep historical context. If you read a legal military document from the 1940s without knowing World War II is happening, you would completely misunderstand it.
That's a great point. So we have to look at what was happening in the city of Medina when verse 51 was revealed. Set the stage for us. What was the political climate?
The Muslim community in Medina was in a state of existential war. They were entirely surrounded by hostile armies intent on wiping them off the map. To survive, the Prophet Muhammad had established a constitution and forged mutual defense treaties with various local tribes, including several Jewish and Christian tribes.
So they formed a coalition government for mutual protection.
Yes. But as the wars escalated, certain specific factions within those allied tribes committed high treason. They secretly broke the treaties and forged clandestine alliances with the invading armies, conspiring to attack the Muslims from within the city walls.
So this isn't a theological debate. This is about military betrayal and national security.
Exactly. Verse 51 was revealed specifically addressing this immediate crisis of treason. The Arabic word used for allies implies a political protective guardianship. The verse is essentially a military directive saying, do not form political and military alliances with the very factions who are actively conspiring to destroy you.
It has nothing to do with everyday friendships.
It has absolutely nothing to do with avoiding a Christian neighbor or not being friends with a Jewish coworker in a peaceful society. We know this for a fact because the permission to eat their food and marry them remains completely valid.
That context changes everything. It's a rule of statecraft, not a ban on personal friendship.
Exactly. And the Quran goes out of its way to ensure Muslims do not paint all people of other faiths with the same broad brush. If we look at verses 82 through 86, the text delivers a beautiful, highly specific praise of certain Christian communities.
What does it say about them?
It states that Muslims will find the Christians to be the closest in affection and love to the believers. And it gives a very specific sociological reason for this warmth. It says that is because among them are priests and monks and because they are not arrogant.
It highlights their humility.
Yes. The verses describe a scene where some of these Christian scholars and monks are listening to the Quran being recited. And as they hear the message, their eyes literally overflow with tears because they recognize the divine truth within it. They weren't defensive or tribal. They were deeply spiritual people whose hearts were soft.
That is a remarkable display of interfaith reverence. It honors the sincerity of another community. At the same time, though, we should impartially report that the surah doesn't shy away from theological disagreements, right?
It doesn't. Islam maintains an uncompromising stance on pure monotheism, the belief in one indivisible God. So Surah Al-Maidah does take time to explicitly clarify the Islamic perspective on Jesus.
How so?
It elevates Jesus as one of the mightiest, most miraculous messengers and prophets of God, but it firmly, respectfully rejects the Christian doctrines that Jesus is the literal Son of God or part of a divine Trinity.
It sets clear theological boundaries.
Yes, it establishes firm theological clarity. Yet, as we've seen, it simultaneously demands perfect justice toward those who disagree, allows for shared meals, and even permits the intimate blending of families. It's a blueprint for a society that holds strong convictions but operates with profound grace.
Wow. We have covered an incredible amount of philosophical and legal ground today. Looking back, it truly makes sense why this chapter is considered the roof of the Islamic structure. It really seals the entire building.
It pulls every aspect of human life, from the spiritual to the political, under one cohesive framework.
Let's briefly retrace our steps on this journey through Surah Al-Maidah. We started with the monumental declaration that the deen, the way of life, was perfected, warning us not to lose our souls to the luxuries of the table spread.
We learn that living that perfected faith begins with fulfilling our uqud, our promises, and taking absolute responsibility for our moral choices, cooperating only in goodness, and never in sin.
We explored the philosophy of mindful eating, discovering how the demand for tayyib, pure and ethical food, protects both our physical bodies and our spiritual hearts.
We tackled the monumental challenge of adl, recognizing that true justice requires us to rise above our human tribalism and treat even our bitterest enemies with perfect fairness, rooted in our taqwa, our consciousness of God.
We witnessed the devastating consequences of injustice in the story of Qabil and Habil, learning that a single human life is so sacred that saving it is equivalent to saving all of humanity.
And finally, we navigated the complexities of living in a diverse world, learning to balance firm theological boundaries with the profound social warmth of shared food, marriages, and mutual respect for the sincere believers of the Al-Kitab.
As we prepare to close out this special deep dive, we want to fulfill the promise we made at the start, to offer a moment of reflection and a brief prayer, or dua, using clear, simple English for our learners.
I think the most vital reflection we can take away is this. The vast rules and laws of Islam are not designed to be a heavy burden or a cage. They are an architecture. They exist to protect human dignity, to keep our hearts uncorrupted by greed, and to ensure we build a society where every living being is treated with profound respect. And here is a short dua, a prayer that we can all carry with us. O Allah, help us to faithfully keep our promises, grant us the courage to be perfectly fair even when it goes against our desires, and teach us to honor and protect the sacred life of every human being.
O Allah, help us to faithfully keep our promises, grant us the courage to be perfectly fair even when it goes against our desires, and teach us to honor and protect the sacred life of every human being. That is a powerful anchor for the week. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure exploring this with you.
And to you, our listener, thank you for sticking with us through this extensive journey. But before we say goodbye, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. I want you to go back to verse 8. Do not let your hatred of a people prevent you from being just.
The ultimate test of character.
Look at the world right now. Look at the international wars, the vicious political divides, the toxic anger that floods our social media feeds every single day. Now imagine a thought experiment. What would happen to the globe tomorrow morning if every human being suddenly adopted that single rule? What if you were forced by your own conscience to be aggressively fair to the coworker you despise, the political party you vote against, or the neighbor who wronged you?
The entire architecture of human conflict would collapse overnight.
It really would. So the challenge is, how do you build that roof on your own house? Who in your life right now is waiting for you to grant them perfect, unbiased fairness? Think about that. Thank you for joining this deep dive. We hope you feel more informed, that your English continues to sharpen, and that you keep asking the big questions. Until next time, stay curious. Goodbye.
Goodbye, and peace be upon you all.